What's going on, everybody? It's Wednesday. I love Wednesdays. I love Wednesdays so much. Sometimes I'm like, I should do 2 Q&A videos a week because they're so much fun. But if I do that, it'll probably water it down and it won't be as much fun. So I'm going to keep doing it once a week, but I really do enjoy it. Always remember, these are my opinions. If you disagree with my opinions, that's okay. People disagree with my opinions all the time. So just tell them below, share what your opinion is and how it differs from mine. Now, I'm armed with my Reindeer Studios Piedmont shirt. Love it. Trying to support Scott over at Reindeer Studios. Great guy, great channel, great stuff. He's got a whole bunch of shirts, so check him out. I will mention him in the description below. So check that out if you're interested in buying something from him. He's got some really cool stuff. The awesome gifts keep rolling in. I can't believe how much you guys spoil me. Dom hooked me up with a bunch of hockey cards. He's like, hey, I'm going to jumpstart your hockey collection. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. So I got this Ovechkin. I mean, that guy's a total stud, right? Sidney Crosby, awesome card. I mean, 2 of the best in the last, 10 years at least, right? And then some vintage hockey stuff too. Some really cool stuff. I love these. Look at the Hall of Famers on there. Love this. Oh man, vintage hockey really is cool. I just don't know enough about a lot of the players to know what I should be buying. But man, I know everyone knows Bobby Orr, right? Yeah, it gave me some really cool stuff. I mean, that's a pretty famous set. We all know that set. And then in addition, he gave me these are really, really cool. So these are, he said, were a regional thing. So you got this one is a Steve Carlton and then a Johnny Bench. The cool thing about regional cards like this is, if you live in a different region, you don't ever see stuff like this. I don't know if I've ever seen these, but they're really cool. It's a restaurant chain, it looks like. Here's a Nolan Ryan one. I mean, how cool is that? Here's what the back looks like. And these are awesome. Brooks Robinson. They're in super good condition. Yeah, I don't know much about them, but I love them. So I really appreciate these. 1976 is when they were printed. That one was printed. Very, very cool. So Dom, you spoiled me big time. Then Ron, probably a future Hall of Famer. Will he make it? Will be interesting to see. Got Alex Rodriguez. He's not going to make it, but that's a cool A-Rod card. Got a cool Pete Rose. And then my guy, 87 Donruss Clemens. And then this league leader Clemens card. And then he slipped into Barry Bonds right there. Now, I like Barry Bonds, and I know, a lot of people don't, but I love the guy. And then, dude, Jeter rookie card. Love it. Ron hooked me up. And then Matthew sent me a bunch of cool stuff. Some cool football cards. Got a Montana in here. Then he sent me some Don Mattingly's. I mean, this card, I remember pulling that card from a pack as a kid. It was the last pack in the box one time. And it had that Mattingly, and I was absolutely thrilled. Another Mattingly. Got the 89 Upper Deck Mattingly. You got one of the best athletes of all time, Deion Sanders, in a Yankee uniform. Are you kidding me? Then you got a nice Clemens here. Then another Mattingly. Love these. Matthew absolutely hooked him up. Then a Jerry Rice wild card. And a Steve Young. He sent me some other things. Those are some of the highlights. Matthew, thank you so much. You 3 absolutely hooked me up. You guys are so good to me. I genuinely appreciate it. And then, as always, there's this theme of people continue sending me these really nice notes. They mean a lot. They really do. All right, let's take a look at your first question for this week. Hello, Greg. I've got a question about fair price to sell a card at comp. Example, I have a card at comp price of $100. Would I sell at 70% of comp to a person for $70? What's your opinion? I have this debate with another collector friend. This is a really interesting question. It's funny because I had a conversation with my dad about this exact topic on the way home from the card show we went to this weekend. And, eh, again, first off, I'll say it depends. I know that sounds like a cop out, but it depends on the situation. So if you're talking about selling a card that I am looking to sell and somebody that I know is looking to buy, and the card comps for $100 online, what would I sell it to like a friend for or somebody I know? Generally speaking, I would probably sell it at about 85% of what it comps for, like on eBay. Because if I sold it on eBay, I would pay the eBay fees and I would have some other, little fees in there. So I would probably end up netting about 85%. So if it was a card that I thought I could sell for $100 on eBay, and a friend of mine at a show said, "Hey, I'm interested in buying that card from you," or not even at a show, just a friend, emailed me or texted me and said, "I want to buy that card off of you," I would probably sell it at 85% of what it comps at, because that's what I would net. Now, if I'm selling to a dealer, right? So I go to a show and I have a stack of cards and I give it to a dealer. There's, I would say, to expect 85% is expecting too much, because again, a lot of dealers are going to sell their things on eBay, so they're going to get 85% on the dollar. So on that $100 card, they would end up getting $85 if they sold it on eBay. But the dealer has to make some money. They're not doing this for free. They're doing this because they're trying to make money. And so if I was selling to a dealer at a show, I would expect to be paying about maybe 70, or being paid about 75% of comps. A lot of dealers will pay 70 to 75% of comps. That gives them a margin of about 10 to 15% in profit, which is a really slim margin. And you say, well, that dealer might buy it for 70% and then they put it in their showcase and they sell it at 100% of comp. Sure, that's absolutely possible, but it's also very possible they don't sell it at the show and then they have to sell it on eBay or another site and pay some fees. So just because they might sell it for 100% of comps at the show, I don't think that it's fair to expect them to pay us 85%. Now, they're taking a lot of risk. They might sit on the card for a while. Something might happen with the card. The player's values may drop. So there is some risk involved. So if you're going to a show and you're cashing out cards, I think it's a little, to me, I would expect to be receiving about 75% of the value. Maybe I would go down to as low as 70. The other thing is people say, well, that's not fair because the dealer's got to pay the table fee. He's got to pay the gas fee to get there. He's got to pay, he's taking all the risk and fronting the money. You're getting cash right there on the spot. So I think it's fair to expect that a dealer would net, at least 10 to 15%. So I guess my response depends on who are you selling it to. If you're selling it to someone you know, I think it's reasonable to charge them 85% of the comp. If you're selling it to a dealer, I think you should expect to receive closer to 70 to 75% of the comp. The overwhelming amount of transactions that take place with cards are happening on auction sites, and the auction sites have fees. So the only time that there aren't those fees and there isn't that paper trail for taxes is if it's a cash deal in person. And so that's kind of the part that is tough to put a dollar amount on the risk and the benefit and the positive and the negative of doing a deal to a dealer or to a friend or a colleague. Now, is it reasonable? Is it understandable to say, no, I want full comp? I mean, you could ask whatever you want, right? You can say, no, if the card sells for $100 on eBay, then I'm going to sell it to you for $100 because you don't have to pay for shipping and you don't have to pay sales tax. And so even at $100, you're doing better paying me full comp than if you bought it online. That's fair as well. I mean, I talked the other day, the sales tax in my area is like 8.5%. And so if I bought a $100 card and I'm paying $6 to ship it, and I'm paying $8.50 or so in taxes, I'm going to end up paying about $115 for a $100 card. So if the person were to say, no, I'm not giving you 15% off, I'm going to charge you what it actually comps at, which is $100, because it's still a better deal for you. I also think that's reasonable. So, I mean, it just kind of depends. Are you doing your friend a favor? Who are you selling it to? If I'm at a show and I'm setting up as a dealer, I'm going to try to get 100% of online comp because I paid all the fees to set up. I've taken the whole day to set up. I lugged all my stuff down there to set up. And the person is still, even if they buy it at full eBay comp, they're still getting a better deal buying it from me at the show because of those other fees that they don't have to pay if they buy it in cash from me at the show. So if I'm selling at a show, I'm going to try to get full eBay comp. I might come down a little bit. But if I'm, a buyer at a show, I think it's somewhat reasonable to pay full eBay comp and hope that you can get less. Hope that you can pay 90% of eBay comp. But it's the dealers that are setting up that their prices are 125% of eBay comp. Those are the ones that I don't understand. Those guys feel like they're just simply, showing off a museum of cards. They're not really looking to sell. Greg, how many times have you won an eBay auction but gotten disappointed when you received the item? And how many times have you received cards filled with cigarette smoke? All right. This is an interesting question. I've had that happen where I bought a card and then I got it and I hated it once. It does happen. My dad has had that happen a few times. It had happened recently, in fact. He bought a card. Now, when I'm spending a lot of money, I especially online, especially on like an eBay or a Golden or something, an REA, whatever it is, I'm not buying ungraded cards for very much money because you really don't know what you're getting until it shows up and you really examine it. So I've said this before, even at a show, and when I'm in person with the card, if it's not graded, I'm not comfortable over a couple $100. But that's just me. That doesn't mean that that's right. There are a lot of great deals that I'm sure I'm missing out on by going, limiting myself from buying some potential great deals because I'm not willing to take that risk. But that's just me, and that's just kind of how I'm wired. At the same time, so let me back up. So the other question was about receiving a card filled with smoke. To be honest with you, that's never happened to me because I almost never buy raw cards online. So, but I'm sure that could happen. Now, the one time I bought a card and I got it and I hated it, it was a fairly expensive card. It was a Walter Payton rookie card. I think it was a PSA 6, if I'm not mistaken. But because it was a fairly expensive card, I made sure they had a return policy. And they had a free returns within like 20 days or something. So I got it and I was like, ooh, this thing is not what I was expecting. And so I returned it. And then the guy gave me a little bit of grief, like, why are you returning it? And I'm like, because it doesn't look like the picture. It doesn't look very good once I saw it. And he wasn't very happy, but he had a return policy. Now, some dealers on eBay or, some people selling on eBay don't have return policies like that. And as a result, personally, I'm not willing to sometimes bid as high when there's not a return policy. So I also get that whole thing too, which is, when you have a return policy, I think sometimes people bid more because they have that sort of satisfaction guarantee. But if they're just bidding and there's no return, then you may not get as high a bids because it is a risk. It is always a risk buying a three-dimensional object when you're looking at a two-dimensional picture. It just is a risk. So I think that answers the question, but it hasn't happened to me a lot, but it has happened, and I know it's a thing. And I think that people, when buying online, need to pay attention, especially on the high-priced items, of whether or not that card or that seller has a return policy, just in case. Hi, Greg. Awesome video. Thank you. I do have a thought/question. You have mentioned a few times that you do not own any PSA 1s and have given the analogy that a PSA 1 is the same as an F in school, where the range for an F is from 0 to 59. Same as a PSA 1, where it can be a card run through the washer, or much better. My question is, if we are avoiding buying PSA 1s, are we ignoring the statement, buy the card, not the grade? Only saying this because there are some super sharp PSA 1s on the front, with maybe a tear on the back, which presents us with amazing buying opportunities to obtain a very appealing card, high-end card, at a low price. Just was curious your thoughts on this. Thank you. All right, so I'm really glad you asked this question because I'm glad I have the opportunity to kind of explain myself a little bit more. Let me first say, I'm not saying don't buy ones. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying don't buy 1.5s. I actually have a few 1.5s in my collection. I don't think I have any ones, but I don't think I have any ones. I definitely have several 1.5s. I have a lot of 2s. So if I came across by saying don't buy ones, then that was not my intention. My intention was saying that the variety of levels of quality of a 1 could be, like you described, a card that went through the washing machine or a fairly nice card. So if I said or came across as don't buy ones, that was not my intention. That was not my intention. My intention was be very, very careful when you buy a 1 because the 1 may not it's just such a variety of what you might be actually buying. That's what I was trying to say. If you go to a 1.5, what it does is it takes that huge chunk of 1s that are not in very good shape, and it's better than all of those in theory, right? In theory. So for whatever reason, it technically meets qualifications that are better than those other 1s. So you're not going to get a card usually that looks like it went through the washing machine. That's a 1.5. But you might have a 1 that looks like it went through the washing machine, and you might have, like you said, a 1 that's fairly nice. So I guess my my suggestion or my follow up would really be, when you have a one that you're bidding on, look it over real carefully, and make sure that you're getting what you think that you're getting, because it could have anything going on that you may not see on the screen. There are a lot of times that, I'll see a card that looks like a nice card and I'm like, how's this a one? Like, this doesn't look like it should be a one. And then I'll look and I'm like, oh, does that have a little pinhole? And the pinhole's not always at the top center. It might be, through a little mark on the card that's hard to see. So a lot of the times I personally get skeptical when I see like a one or a 1.5, because I go, does this have a pinhole? Now, some people don't care about pinholes. And then some people, like my dad and I, consider, a pinhole to be the death penalty to a sports card. So, but again, and then here's the other thing. Some people don't mind pinholes at all. And some people don't mind, paper loss on the back at all. So you might see a one or a 1.5 that looks like a beautiful card, like you mentioned, and you go, oh, I'm going to buy this card because it's beautiful. It just has this paper loss on the back because it used to be taped into a scrapbook. But I don't care because I'm not looking at the back. I don't care about the back. So it is a great buying opportunity. At the end of the day, I do believe in buying the card, not the grade, but I also believe in buying what suits your eye. Like, some people don't care about centering. Some people don't care about corners. Some people don't care about paper loss on the back. Some people don't care about creases. Some people don't care about stains. It depends on what you're okay with. Now, if it's for your collection, if it's a card that you're buying that you're planning on selling in the not too distant future, then you need to think about, well, what does the card collecting community tend to prefer? But if it's a card for your collection and it has a stain on the back and you could care less about a stain on the back, then it might be a great buying opportunity. So what might be distracting for me on a card may not be distracting for someone else on the card. So I know that that's kind of a long answer, and that, but I do appreciate the opportunity to, I hope, give a little bit of clarification into my comments from before, because yeah, a one could be a disaster card, but it could be a pretty decent card. But the difference between a two, a low two and a high two might be this much. But the difference between a low one and a high one could be dramatically different. That was the point I was trying to make, not that nobody should ever buy a one. Okay, Greg, here is my query. Although I do not have photos of the cards relating to the question, among the wonderful Brooklyn Dodger collection I bought about 15 months ago. First, a 1957 Koufax with perfect centering, but the slightest of corner wear, visible only with 5 times lighted magnification. 50-50 in both directions. Second, a moderately off-center 1957 Drysdale rookie. Perfectly corners with PSA grade 8 level centering. Given the criteria set by PSA and SGC, which would be the best grading company to have them graded? Within the context of PSA being more lenient with centering and SGC not as lenient, and also the context of SGC being, as I understand, having a different criterion than PSA for any imperfections other than the critical issue of centering. Oh man, this is a good question. I think this is a really important question. And again, I'm going to probably repeat myself a lot. It always depends. It depends on what is your reasoning for grading the card. Are you grading the card because you want to get the added value of having a high grade because you're looking to sell it? Because if you're looking to sell it, there is still a premium for PSA over SGC. In fact, I'm planning on very soon trying to do another quick little snapshot at the differences of what cards are selling for in different holders. But are you sending it to PSA or SGC because you want to sell it? Or are you sending it to SGC or PSA because you're going to just add it to your collection and you want to get the best grade? Is the reasoning that you're going to grade it just to protect it and authenticate it? So it kind of depends on that. If you're planning on selling it and you're trying to get the most for the money out of the cards, then yeah, it's probably still best to do PSA, but PSA might give you a different grade because their specifications are a little bit different. Now, your comment infers that you actually looked at the differences in the specifications between SGC and PSA, because on their websites, it absolutely says, for a card to be a 6, it has this, and it gives a good description. And then SGC has one and it says it needs to have this. And they're very similar, but they are different. They are different. Now, here's the other thing though. There is a difference, unfortunately, between what the website says meets certain qualifications and what actually seems to happen, right? To me, what I tend to see is SGC tends to grade more on eye appeal. So centering seems to be a bigger deal to SGC than PSA, because SGC's grades are a lot about how does the card look when I'm looking at it. And PSA seems to be a little bit less about that human element of how it looks, and it's more about just the technical requirements of what percentages of the centering and how rounded are the corners and things like that. Now, I thought it was my imagination, because it always seems like if SGC gets a card with good eye appeal, the grade is a little bit higher than a PSA card might get with high eye appeal. But then I saw an interview, and it's tough when I just say, no, I saw an interview, trust me. But I saw an interview, trust me, and it was with Peter Steinberg, the president of SGC. And I think I know what interview it was from, but I don't remember for sure, so I don't want to attach it to a particular conversation that I saw him have. But I know that I heard him say, where a crease is located affects the grade. So if the crease is through the player's face, it would affect the grade more than if the crease is on the edge or on the corner or on the side of the card. Now, it doesn't say in the SGC, grading guidelines, a crease in the face. It just says a crease or multiple creases. It doesn't say multiple creases in the face do this to the grade. But I heard the president of the company say where the crease is located affects the grade. And it seems like eye appeal does seem to be a bigger factor for SGC than PSA, which is more about the technical scores. So I guess my response to you is, why are you getting it graded again, right? If you're getting it graded because you want the highest grade possible between PSA and SGC, it sounds to me like the cards that you're describing have really good eye appeal. So I think you're going to probably get better grades from SGC. If you're getting the cards graded because you're looking to have them maximize their value now and potentially down the road and be able to sell them for a higher margin, then I would say it still seems like these cards will do fairly well at PSA. Now, do you want to pay more like you will at PSA? Do you want to wait longer like you will at PSA? or do you want to get your cards back quickly, or does that not matter? So there are so many factors that play a role in it. I'll just leave it with this. If I were you, if I were you and I had those two cards in my collection and they were not cards that I was planning on selling anytime soon, I personally would send them to SGC. So whenever anybody asks me what advice do you have or what are your thoughts on something, I always want to say, well, what I would do is this, because you don't want to be that person that says, well, what I would do is this, but then do something else. Like that person's kind of, but if you are asking my advice and what would you do, Greg, I would take both of those cards and I would send them to SGC. And I think that 57 Topps cards look outstanding in SGC slabs. And based on what you described, I think your grades will be at least as good as PSA, potentially a little bit better because they seem like really high eye appeal cards. So I think SGC is probably your best bet. But if you're looking for the most money potentially down the road or in the near future for them, then I would consider PSA for those particular cards with the description that you provided. That would not necessarily be across the board what I would recommend for any card, any year, any situation. But in this situation, I would send those cards to SGC. What is your philosophy in setting a budget in the card hobby? You have shared that you have a $100 budget for cards each month. I sometimes hear about people overextending their money in collecting cards. How difficult is it for you to stay disciplined when you have a budget and you see a card you really want? All right. It's so interesting that so many of these topics came up in the car ride discussion I had with my dad the other day. He was talking about, I don't see myself ever spending this large amount of money on some card that he wants. And I'm like, why? And he was just like, I don't know, it just seems crazy to spend that much money on a card. And I'm like, why? If you have the money, then why? And so we kind of went back and forth. Now, let me circle back to that in a second. Number one, this is a hobby. And your hobby should never put your family or yourself at financial risk. So in my personal opinion, I will never spend money. I will never cross the line of spending family money on my cards. If there's ever a time where some situation arises and we need money and I don't have the money for it because I have cards instead, that is not a position I'm going to put myself in. Now, is it hard to budget my money? Is it hard to not buy stuff? Is it hard when I see a card that I really want to not buy it? Of course. Every time I walk through a car dealership, I want a new car, right? Every time I go to a mall, I see a bunch of stuff that I'd like to have. Whenever I go through a shoe store, there are a bunch of pair of shoes I'd like to pick up. But that doesn't mean I buy them because I'm practical, right? I believe in being financially responsible. So my advice to people is have a separate, and I strongly believe this one. And my buddy Darren and I from Return to Collecting, we talked about this topic not that long ago, and I picked his brain on it. And he threw out some suggestions, and some of them I'm now doing because I think he made some great points. And I believe you should have a separate location for your card funds. If your card funds and your life funds are intermingled, that's dangerous. That can be dangerous for some people. Because you go, oh, well, I'll just buy this and then I won't buy anything next month. Or, for the next 3 months, I won't buy anything because I'm just going to buy this. if you have money in a separate location and there's a card you really want, you go, oh man, I really want this. And then you look in your account and you go, I don't have enough to buy it. My PayPal account is hooked up to my card account. And if I don't have the money in there, I physically can't buy it. That in itself prevents me from potentially spending money that I shouldn't be spending, because it would decline, right? So number one is definitely have a card account, and then that way it prevents you from overextending yourself. Now, back to the comment with my dad about, hey, why not buy the card? See, the thing about cards is they're assets. They have monetary value. And generally speaking, depending on what you're collecting, they don't have depreciation. Most of them appreciate in value. Now, people say, oh, well, Greg, no, since 2 years ago, cards are way down. If I had bought this, Jackie Robinson rookie card, it's down from 2 years ago. Yes. Every type of investment, every type of asset on the short term has downward times. A housing market over 1 year, it could go down. But a housing market over 20 years? When was the last time the housing market was less than it was 20 years ago? When was the last time the stock market was less than it was 20 years ago? But 20 months ago? Yeah, it could definitely be down. See, assets like houses, like the stock market, real estate, things, they tend to be pretty safe long-term investments. And if you're looking at cards, or you're looking at precious metals or coins or gold, silver, right? If you're looking at those sorts of things, they might go down over the next year. But over the next 10 years, they're probably going to be up. Will they for sure? No. Nothing is for sure. But if I look at market trends over the last 150 years, and you look, most things, it looks like this, or I guess from your angle, it'd look like this, right? But in there are lots of little peaks and valleys where things happened. Look at the last 150 years of the stock market, or 120 years of the stock market. You're going to see this little blip that was the Great Depression. Now, you can hardly even tell that it was a big drop. And this is when people were jumping out of the windows of buildings because the stock market was crashing and their entire family fortune was gone. But when you zoom out and you look at it over 120 years, you can hardly even tell that it dropped. Now, that's getting a little bit dramatic, but back to the point with my dad. Because a card is an asset, and a card can, go up in value, it could go down in value, it could stay flat. It's not a highly depreciating item like a brand new car. It's not a $70,000 car that in 4 years will be, $28,000. It will probably hold its value. It might go up a little. It might go down a little. So what I was saying to my dad was, Dad, if you want the 53 Topps Mickey Mantle, go buy it. Because if you decide you don't want it anymore, it's still probably going to be worth pretty close, or maybe even more, than what you bought it for. So for me, when I'm buying cards, I'm not in love with any card in my collection. There are a couple that have sentimental value, for sure, that I wouldn't sell, that are worth more to me than anybody else. But for the most part, if there's a card in my collection and I'm not married to it, and I go, I really want a 53 Topps Mickey Mantle, I can buy the 53 Topps Mickey Mantle if I just sell a few cards to pay for it. So the thing about cards is, it's not like you spend the money and then it's gone. It's not a vacation. right? Once you're home from the vacation, you're not on the vacation anymore, but the money's gone. Going out to dinner, spend $100 on dinner, it's gone. But you spend $100 on cards, you still have the card. And the card is still worth, give or take, $100. So it's a different type of asset than some things that depreciate rapidly, right? If you buy a suit and you decide in 6 months you wish you hadn't bought the $1,000 suit, that's an expensive suit, by the way, you can't just return the suit after 6 months. But if you buy a 53 tops Mickey Mantle and 6 months later you go, man, I wish I hadn't bought that, you can get most of, if not all of your money back. So because of that, it's not as risky as some things, assuming you're not buying, Mac Jones cards and Trevor Lawrence cards and, that kind of thing. But if you're a vintage collector, like most of us are, it's an asset that's probably going to have a very similar value in the future. With that said, if you've got a question for me for next week's episode, please take a second down below in the comments. Just simply type your question. I always look forward to your questions. I always look forward to giving you my opinions on them. And I look forward to reading what you all think about what I had to say. So if you agree, let me know. If you disagree, let me know. These are not facts. These are opinions. I'm interested in yours, and I'm interested in your questions for next week.